I'm Matt Morrow, and this is Colorado Point of View. It's been another very busy week in Washington. Time for a shutdown showdown in the Senate. The talk of tariffs have everyone from Wall Street to Main Street and small businesses right here in Colorado on edge. Plus, the Department of Education just got slashed nearly in half. We're recording Colorado Point of View here on Thursday afternoon, just about 36 hours before the government could shut down. And it all depends on what happens in the U.S. Senate. Here's what House Speaker Mike Johnson said just after the short-term spending bill barely passed his chamber this week.
We send it to the Senate, and it falls on the desk of Chuck Schumer. He is the leader of the Democrats on that side, and he must determine whether he wants to fund the government, do the responsible thing, or whether he wants to shut the government down.
Well, that bill now needs 60 votes to pass in the Senate. Republican Senator Rand Paul is a no, which means as it stands right now, 8 Democrats would need to vote yes to keep the government running. And joining me now for an exclusive interview from his office in Washington, D.C. is Colorado Senator Michael Bennet. Senator, it's good to see you. Thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
It's nice to see you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's jump right into this. Yes or no? How are you going to vote on this spending bill?
Well, I'm going to join my colleague John Hickenlooper and vote no. Unfortunately, this bill could have had the benefit of bipartisan negotiations between Democrats and Republicans. It hasn't. It's been my way or the highway. And my hope is that in the days and hours ahead, between now and this broadcast, that we will find a way through this and to the other side of this very difficult moment in American history.
Does this mean that other Democrats beyond Senator John Hickenlooper are also going to vote no? And as it stands right now, the government could very well shut down Saturday morning?
Well, we don't know yet what's going to happen on Saturday morning. We will. It's so nuts. We'll know by the time that your program airs on Sunday. But for now, we're just going to keep working away to see whether we can get to a decent result here for the American people and for people in Colorado.
What do you say for other senators? Some Democrats who say, yes, they don't really necessarily like this spending bill as it is. They see it as bad, but they see it worse that the government could shut down and really put people's lives into turmoil in the country as well.
I think that we have had an unbelievable debate in the caucus. I wish we had had a debate, with both Republicans and Democrats. But I think there will be people that come to different conclusions about this. I don't fault them for that. I think in the end, we have to find a way to be able to show that with Donald Trump as president, it can't be business as usual on the one hand, but we also have to find a way to work together not to damage our government and not to damage the American people. And that, I hope, ultimately, I believe ultimately we will find a pathway through that. But I know how difficult a choice this was. Talking to many of my colleagues, Senator Hickenlooper and I have ended up on one side of this saying we're going to vote no. I can understand why people might make a different decision.
Do you think Democrats will pay a political price if indeed the government does shut down in a few days?
I think that in the end, the chaos that President Trump is causing is what we really need to worry about and focus on. I think that that is what I hear about from the federal employees who have been let go in Colorado, from the communities in Colorado that are served, for example, by our Forest Service at a moment when we're reaching the beginning of our fire season in Colorado. That's a huge concern. The federal funds that are being cut off that Congress appropriated and that we fought so hard for Colorado that have been either delayed or threatened to be delayed by this administration. That's the kind of thing that people are focused on, including, by the way, the tariffs that we're all wrestling with at the same time as President Trump kind of upends our historic foreign policy relationships around the world. So there's a lot for everybody to worry about. But I think if we come together as Coloradans, we come together as Americans, we will overcome this and we will restore in the United States an exercise in our self-government that actually begins to focus on the things our kids need us to focus on, like their education, like our health care, like an energy and climate policy in America that could really support Colorado's economy.
You talked about the need for federal wildfires, especially as we get into summer here. The bill here would support federal wildland firefighters, including raising their pay and providing premium pay for those responding to fires. It would also increase funding for air traffic control systems by about $750 million. It would decrease non-defense spending by about $13 billion. At the end of the day, I guess the question is for you and for other Democrats who are going to vote no, is it worth it to say no to all of that to potentially put people out of work for a little while and create more anxiety, as you talked about with the job cuts that have already happened?
Well, I think it's worth it for the reasons that I said earlier, but I will say that I am very pleased that a bill related to firefighter pay is in there. That's something that I have fought for literally for years and years and years. A bill that I had called the Timbs Act that is named after a firefighter who lost his life, and his colleagues have come together to try to insist over the years that we don't just increase pay for firefighters, but we also dramatically improve their working conditions. Unfortunately, the working conditions aren't part of this legislation, but there is an increase in the pay, as you said, and I'm very pleased that that's in there.
Okay, we'll see what happens in the next couple of days. There's been a lot of other big news coming out this week. In fact, new today, Russia's President Vladimir Putin says he's now open to the idea of a 30-day ceasefire. The U.S. brokered it this week with Ukraine's leaders who say they're definitely on board. What do you think the chances are that Putin agrees to this 30-day ceasefire? And if so, he actually sticks with it and honors it?
I would never count on Vladimir Putin to stick with or honor anything. I wouldn't believe a single word that he says. He is one of the most malevolent forces in the world. I really believe that.
Do you support the idea of the 30 days?
Terrible for the country of Ukraine and cause the deaths. What?
Go ahead. Continue there, please, Senator. I apologize.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say, do you support the idea of the 30-day ceasefire that Secretary of State and your former colleague in the Senate, Marco Rubio, helped broker?
Well, I actually have been very disappointed in a way that this administration, including my old colleague Marco Rubio, has undercut the negotiating position of Ukraine. I was in Ukraine about 2 weeks ago. They're killing more Russians these days on the front lines than they were 6 months ago. And the United States cut off our intelligence. They cut off their arms. And, President Trump obviously had that fight in the Oval Office with President Zelensky, which I think helped no one. But let me say this. I'm a lot less interested in how this negotiation starts than how it ends. And what Ukraine needs and what the world needs is a peace that is durable and it is just and that is constructed in a way that means that Putin can't invade again and put us in the same position that we're in today. Ukraine's fight is not just a fight for Ukraine. It's a fight for freedom, for Europe, for the Western world, for our national security. And in the end, unless there is a peace guarantee from a security guarantee from Europe and a security guarantee from the United States, Putin will just do this again. And we need to be clear-eyed about that. And I believe very strongly, notwithstanding President Trump's, undermining of Ukraine's negotiating position, that the American people, especially the ones that have in mind the model of the greatest generation who fought World War II and knew what the stakes were, who are saying to our leadership, make sure that we support Ukraine to the fullest extent, and that's what I will always do.
Okay, we'll see what happens with that in the next few days. Quickly here, DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is terminating leases for federal buildings all around the country. We did a little research this week and found at least 19 buildings here in Colorado are having their leases cut, an estimated cost savings here of $9.4 million. These buildings are for everything from the Forest Service, the Corps of Engineers, Social Security, mine safety, and more. From what you have heard about this, is this going to directly impact people here in Colorado, or is this more of an administrative move?
I think it could very well impact people in Colorado. Look, I'm for reforming our government. I think there are parts of our federal government that don't work well. I think there's parts of state government and local government that don't work well. I spent a long part of my career trying to turn around the Denver public schools, and also buying failing businesses and turning them around when I was in the private sector. So I know there are failing enterprises in the public sector and the private sector. But what you do about it and how you approach it matters. And laying off a bunch of firefighters, for example, right before our fire season starts in Colorado is not the right way to approach it. And I suspect that there was not a thoughtful approach taken to the cancellation of the leases in Denver, but we will stay on it. My office is now working almost full time with the effects of these across the board cuts to the funding that Congress passed and that we fought for to get to Colorado, as well as the layoffs of federal employees. And I hope once we stabilize all of that, we can begin to work again on the things that the American people need us to work on, like create an economy that when it grows, grows for everybody, not just the people at the very top, which is what Donald Trump seems to be so focused on.
And before we go today, Senator, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your future. I heard it from one high-level Democratic source just today that Michael Bennet plans to run for governor in 2026. Are you going to run for governor?
Well, today's not the day to make an announcement like that, and I'm not in the place to do it either. I think for all of us, the most important thing we need to be asking ourselves is, what can we do to build on the legacy that our parents and grandparents left for us, and provide the opportunity that our kids and grandparents and our kids and grandkids are going to need from us? That's what I'm thinking about, and I'll let you know when I have a decision.
All right, please do. Colorado Senator Michael Bennet. Senator, it's
Thanks
nice to see you as always. Thank you for your time today.
Nice to see you, and good luck to all of us.
All right, thank you, Senator. Up next, my interview with Colorado Republican Representative Jeff Hurd. Stay there. We are back here on Colorado Point of View, and we're going back to that short-term spending bill. This week in the House, all of Colorado's Democrats said no to the bill that would keep the government up and running, while all of the Republicans said yes. That includes one of the state's newest congressmen, Jeff Hurd, who represents the western slope and much of southern Colorado, and joins me now for an exclusive interview. Congressman, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Happy to join you.
All right, let's start with that spending bill. I know you couldn't hear my conversation with Senator Michael Bennet just a few minutes ago, but he said both he and John Hickenlooper are no's on this bill and that Democrats may not have enough votes to pass it. That being said, are you getting ready to potentially go back to D.C. if you have to vote again on this?
I sure hope we don't. The Democrats forcing a shutdown will mean hundreds of thousands of federal employees furloughed and lots more that don't get the pay that they deserve. It would be a bad thing if the government is shut down, and if it is, it would be 100% because of Democrats, and that's not a good thing for our country or for Colorado.
At the end of the day, why do you support this bill?
Well, a couple reasons. First, the continuing resolution cuts overall spending by $7 billion. That's a step in the right direction. It also increases support for veterans, healthcare, and housing. There's also a pay increase for junior enlisted military personnel. It boosts spending for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Also increases spending for women, infant, and children supplemental nutrition, increases funding for air traffic control, and also increases support for rural communities like those I represent. So it's not an ideal way to govern continuing resolutions. We need to find long-term funding solutions, but keeping the government running while working toward responsible spending policy, I think, is essential, and that's why I support it.
You talked about some of the increases in spending that the bill provides for, but it also has some cuts, $185 million for nuclear non-proliferation programs, $1.4 billion for the Army Corps of Engineers, $30 million for broadband, particularly in rural communities like the ones you represent, and $800 million for VA construction. Are you concerned about those cuts and how they could affect your district?
I think there's sufficient funding in this continuing resolution to make sure that we provide those critical services that we rely on in my district, certainly. Look, we have a spending problem in federal government. It's important that we make the cuts in the right places. I think this spending bill, again, is a step in the right direction. And I think government has funds that they need in order to effectively deliver services in the district. And I think this bill is a step in the right direction.
Oh, this follows a House passing a much bigger budget bill last month. It had $4.5 billion in tax cuts, along with the goal of cutting $2 trillion. I should say $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, along with the goal of cutting $2 trillion in spending in the next decade. But it does not specify exactly where the cuts come from. It's left a lot of people wondering, including many who voted for you and for President Trump. They're on edge and are worried that Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security could be cut in the future. Should those programs face any cuts, or should they be protected?
Well, I think we need to protect them, and we need to make sure that they deliver the services that people rely on. Particularly in my district, Medicaid is something that is relied upon by a significant number of people in my district. I think we need to make sure that those dollars are used effectively and fairly as well. States like California get way more in Medicaid spending per person than we get in Colorado. I think there's a fairness issue there that we need to address, and I'm committed to making sure that the people that most need Medicaid, the poor, working poor, pregnant moms and children, continue to get that support through Medicaid. What exactly the budget resolution is going to look like, I think we're going to have to see as those things are worked out in the committee at the committee level. But it's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on and making sure that we protect the most vulnerable Coloradans.
There's also a lot of talk of tariffs as of late. On again, off again have dominated Washington this week. Do you support how President Trump is enacting them and even just sort of talking about them and getting people on edge?
Sure. Well, I believe in free markets and in the power of competition to drive economic growth. I do think tariffs have a strategic role in, for example, onshoring some of the critical national security type manufacturing that we have here. I think one of the things that I'm looking for from the president, and I know a number of people in my district are also looking for, is just some certainty with respect to tariffs and how we're assessing these tariffs. So as a general matter, I'm not a huge fan of tariffs, but I do understand their strategic importance and their importance in negotiation. And I look forward to seeing the administration and President Trump advance a policy that helps protect our most critical industries, brings onshores those essential national security industries, and lets our economy grow and thrive.
How do Republicans bring that up to the president, especially when he seems so sort of set on some of these tariffs? He talked about them just a short time ago in the White House today. How do you bring them up to him respectfully and sort of get across that point of what you and your constituents are looking for?
Well, oftentimes it's not in the national media. It's not in a way that people necessarily see front and center, but it's behind the scenes working with administrative officials. We have a great relationship with the White House and with the administration. And so a lot of that is passing along the information about how these tariffs are affecting people in the 3rd Congressional District. In my case, and I know others in other districts are transmitting those to the president as well. So it's a delicate balance for sure. You need to do it thoughtfully and persuasively as well. And that's something that we're working on every single day to make sure that the industries in my district are certainly protected when it comes to these economic issues.
This week, you, along with Colorado Congressman Gabe Evans, introduced the Productive Public Lands Act. It would reverse the Biden administration's work to protect public lands, open them up to a lot to recreation, oil and gas drilling, and more. Here in Colorado specifically, where would you like to see more recreation and more energy development happen?
Well, certainly there are 3 particular so-called resource management plans that we're asking the government to go back on and go to the drawing board with. In Western Colorado, there's one here in Grand Junction. There's a big game habitat issue that we're looking at as well. And then there's also a sage grouse so-called resource management plan that we're looking at. Essentially, what my concern is, and the reason that it was important to introduce this legislation, is that the resource management plans that the Bureau of Land Management issued under President Biden effectively halted development activities, not just energy, but also agriculture and reasonable urban expansion under the guise of, for example, species protection, the sage grouse. I think my concern is that this is going to be kind of a blueprint for future land grabs across the West, and it's important that we stop this bad public policy in its tracks and that we make sure that we honor the multiple use mandate that we have when it comes to federal lands.
Are you concerned at all that the cuts to Bureau of Land Management, as you just talked about, the Forest Service, USDA, and other agencies will hurt Colorado, especially when it comes to national parks, conserving water, and very importantly, mitigating and fighting wildfires?
Let me say, first and foremost, I support 100% the president's efforts to economize government and make government work more effectively, more efficiently. I think if you talk to folks in these agencies, they will tell you that there is room for trimming and more effective use of taxpayer dollars. I will tell you, I do have some concerns about where these cuts are taking place. I think what we've seen is some of the individuals that are being cut are the boots on the ground that are actually managing our public lands and mitigating that wildfire risk. And so my concern is that some of the cuts that are being made are not being made in the right spot. Cuts are certainly needed, cuts are appropriate, but we need to make sure they're in the right spot to mitigate fire damage. With respect to fire specifically, I will tell you I am worried. This is a dry winter here in western and southern Colorado. The cuts that are happening aren't to firefighters specifically, which is good, but they are to cuts for those individuals that are supporting firefighters and making sure that we properly manage public lands and mitigate the dangers of fire. So I am concerned about that.
All right, Congressman, just about 15 seconds left here. You also supported bringing the headquarters of the BLM back to Grand Junction as it was under the first Trump administration. Any update on that happening?
It's continuing to move through the process. We're going to go through the legislative process and make sure that the federal land managers that are making decisions about lands here in the West are connected to the land and engaged with the stakeholders in a way that they're not if they're thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C.
All right, Colorado Congressman from the Western Slope in southern Colorado, Jeff Hurd. Congressman, thanks so much for your time today. It's good to see you. I appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
We'll be right back. Stay there. And finally, here on Colorado Point of View today, obviously things are changing in Washington by the minute, by the hour, and by the day. For the latest on the spending bill, what happens with it? Will the government shut down? And what happens with the latest on job cuts and some orders from judges? You can head to KDVR.com and get new information there anytime and anywhere. My thanks to our guests today, Colorado Senator Michael Bennet and Colorado Congressman Jeff Hurd. Thank you so much for joining us here on Colorado Point of View. I'm Matt Morrow. We'll see you again soon.